So you saw it with your own eyes. You saw millions of Frenchmen marching in defiance of the murderous, terrorist censorship of a satirical magazine called Charlie Hebdo, where jihadists killed 12 people last Wednesday. You saw the president of France lead the march on Sunday, along with dozens of world leaders. And the slogan, Je suis Charlie, was everywhere on signs. I am Charlie, as in, you terrorists can't kill all of us. And you heard the news that the new issue of Charlie Hebdo out yesterday sold out immediately. And now there are plans to print more, many more, 3 million, maybe 5 million more copies of the magazine, with a picture of Mohammed right on the cover as a symbol of free speech and defiance. You know all of that. But did you know that while France was patting itself on the back for being so committed to free speech, they arrested someone for free speech? An odious man, to be sure, but not a violent man, not a terrorist. His name is Dieudonné Mbala. He goes just by his first name, Dieudonné. He started out as a comedian and a controversialist. In fact, he used to do a risque tag team comedy show with a Moroccan Jew, but they split over artistic differences years ago. But no problem for Dieudonné. He blossomed, finding a market in anti-Semitic comedy amongst France's Muslim population. I'm not sure if it's even comedy anymore. It's just anti-Semitism. Dieudonné is perhaps most famous for inventing a new Nazi salute. Instead of holding his arm up, he holds it down. He explained it's a symbol for anal rape. Yeah, like I say, not so much a comedian anymore. You can see him posing here, in the 2009 election poster in France for the anti-Zionist political party. Of course, anti-Zionism is just code for anti-Jews. Dieudonné appears on stage with Holocaust deniers, and he mocks Jews about the Holocaust, mocks the Holocaust itself. He's a racist, but he isn't an immigrant to France. He was born there, the same way the odious Anjem Choudary, the extremist imam we've had on our show before, was born in the United Kingdom. You can't deport someone born in your country. Anyways, over the weekend, after the terrorist attacks in Paris and the march, Dieudonné made a post on Facebook modifying that free speech slogan from Je suis Charlie, writing in French, tonight, as far as I'm concerned, I feel like Charlie Koulibaly. Koulibaly, that's the last name of Amedy Koulibaly, the terrorist who killed 5 people in Paris, including the 4 Jews at the kosher grocery store. So Dieudonné seemed to be saying he identified with a murderer of Jews, as much as with the Charlie Hebdo journalists. This isn't particularly new coming from him. 50% self-promotion, 50% anti-Semitism. Well, he was arrested and charged with a crime, charged with glorifying terrorism. That's the charge. He was arrested not for doing terrorism, not for assisting with it, planning it, encouraging others to do it, fundraising for it. No, but he was arrested for verbally writing something too friendly to the terrorists. Je suis Charlie Koulibaly on Facebook. And he later took it down. Is that really where the police ought to be putting their efforts and resources these days in Paris? 3 days of terrorism, a half-dozen terrorists still on the loose right now, authorities say. But they're arresting a kook for writing something dumb on Facebook? Oh, I know. You're offended by Dieudonné. I am too. I know you are. But that's not a crime, or it shouldn't be. It actually is in France. Dieudonné himself has been sued and prosecuted countless times for saying the wrong thing. And most of the time, I think what he was sued for was odious, not even funny, just downright racist. But none of it is terrorism, and none of it is a crime, or at least should be a crime, but it is in France apparently. But hang on, how do you have a million-man march for freedom of speech and moments later prosecute someone for saying something dumb on Facebook? Doesn't that show that you're not really for free speech? Are the French for free speech or not? Of course, Dieudonné loves this. Of course, now he's the center of attention and again, he's part of the biggest news story in France in a decade, revived his career. More than that, he's managed to make himself the victim here. He's odious, but now he's the victim. He's being prosecuted for a joke by the government. Only a government censor could make someone so horrible look like the victim. And doesn't it cast into question any legitimate police work, legitimate anti-terrorism work by the French authorities? I mean, I'm sure they have a lot of real terrorists to go after and a lot of real charges to lay, but now couldn't someone say, oh, they're just political, they're not real crimes, because we know that the French government pursued political crimes, joke crimes, Facebook crimes against Dieudonné. I'm not talking about actually inciting or encouraging terrorism. I think there are some words that are criminal. Uttering a death threat, for example, it's an obvious one. But really, I am Charlie Koulibaly, stupid, yeah. Tone deaf to France and the world, yeah. But a crime? Or maybe I haven't convinced you. Maybe you are so mad at him for being so offensive that you want to charge him anyways, just to feel better. You can't get back at the real terrorists, they're dead, and others are beyond the reach of authorities. So let's take out our anger and frustration on this idiot. I get it. I mean, Dieudonné's comment was really France's equivalent to the Westboro Baptist Church, you know, that fringe group of nuts who just used to protest with rude political signs at the funerals of American soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan or Iraq, you know, the ones with the signs that said things like, God hates fags and God hates the USA. They would literally show up at funerals of soldiers with these odious signs. And you know what? American courts allowed that. Odious, but not criminal. Hateful, but hate is a natural human emotion that can no more be outlawed than love can be legislated. Oh, by the way, you know how this all works, all this law stuff, right? In law school, they still teach a bit of Latin, and one phrase they teach is stare decisis, which means stand by the decision, which means follow precedent, which means what's good for the goose is good for the gander, which means if you can prosecute Dieudonné for saying he feels like Charlie Koulibaly, you can also prosecute someone for saying they think Islam is wrecking France. And in fact, that is exactly what happened to the famous French former model and actress, Brigitte Bardot. Bardot is political in her old age. In particular, she's an animal rights activist, which is perhaps why she started to chafe against Islam. For example, she's opposed to the Muslim way of slaughtering meat to make it halal. She wrote a book criticizing halal meat and was fined $3,000 by the French government for inciting racial hatred. Of course, Bardot hates everyone and anyone who treats animals cruelly in her mind. She hates the Canadian seal hunt, for example, but she was only convicted of insulting Muslims, because that's how the law works. She's been prosecuted again and again for books, for statements, even for a letter she wrote to the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy. Here's what she wrote in that letter, that France was, and I quote, tired of being led by the nose by this population that is destroying us, destroying our country by imposing its acts. Now, that's obviously her honest opinion, and she wrote it to a national leader, a politician. Isn't that her right? But French anti-racism groups filed lawsuits against her and won thousands of dollars. Do you see my point? If you make mere political views criminal, if you say that the human emotion of hate is now criminal because you want to shut up Dieudonné, don't you see how that same law, following the legal concept of precedent, of stare decisis, can be used against Brigitte Bardot? If you turn ideas and thoughts and feelings into crimes, why would that be limited to only one side of a political debate? In fact, aren't we all guilty of hating something or being rude to someone at some time in our lives? So all it really takes is an activist or a bureaucrat to decide to go after you. I mean, we're all guilty of emotion crimes sometime. We just need to be charged. I know about this firsthand. In the 1960s and 70s, left-wing activists, Jews mainly as it so happens, pressed for so-called hate speech laws in Canada. They were all targeting a handful of neo-Nazi activists in Toronto. Neo-Nazi isn't even really the right word. They weren't violent like Nazis. They just didn't like Jews. But these activists didn't do anything criminal at all. They were just really, really irritating. So the Canadian Jewish Congress pressed the Liberal government to have hate speech laws enacted, and they were. And for years, those laws in Canada, such as Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, were used almost exclusively by the Jews against anti-Semitic losers. I say losers because calling them criminals isn't really accurate. And the Canadian Criminal Code was amended too, to add hate propaganda and promoting genocide to the Criminal Code too, all because some idiots kept irritating the Jewish community. But hey, why should only Jews get to use those laws to go after their political enemies? In the 1970s and 80s, not a lot of other people wanted to use those censorship laws. But in recent years, as Canada's Muslim population has skyrocketed, radical Muslims said, hey, if the Jews can go after their enemies, why can't we go after our enemies? And so Mark Steyn was prosecuted under the human rights hate speech laws, not for hate propaganda, not for calling for genocide, not even for insulting Islam himself, but merely for writing about its demographic and political rise in Maclean's magazine. Of course, I was prosecuted too under Alberta's Human Rights Act for merely showing the Danish cartoons of Muhammad to illustrate a news story on the subject. 900 days I was prosecuted, but hey, stare decisis. That's the law. Base it on precedent. But it's worse because when ordinary people learn that you can't say certain words in our culture, that we have to give hypersensitive people a veto over everything we say, that all you have to do to shut up and shut down your opponents is to complain to some authority at a university, at a human rights commission. Well, we're teaching people to be weak. We teach them to value the counterfeit human right not to be offended. We teach cowardice and moral confusion. And so you get what was revealed this week. After the Charlie Hebdo murders, it was revealed that Oxford University Press, the prestigious book publisher based at Britain's greatest university, the world's oldest English-speaking university, that university now has a policy that they put in writing asking a children's author not to write about pigs, sausages, or anything to do with pork. I'm serious. So no more Three Little Pigs and the Bad Wolf. No more Charlotte's Web. No Miss Piggy and Kermit. No Babe the Wonder Pig. No This Little Piggy Went to Market. I mean, it's absurd. But the excuse that Oxford used was even worse. They said they were doing it out of deference to Muslims and Jews. Hang on. And Jews? I mean, I'm a Jew. We don't eat pork at our house. Some Jews do, some Jews don't. But no Jews hate pigs. It's not a hate thing or a fear thing. It's just a don't eat it thing. Jews are not against stories about pigs or sausages or pictures of pigs or sausages. I've got a ton of kids' books featuring pigs, farm animal books, Olivia the Dancing Pig. I've never heard a Jew ever, not the most Orthodox or observant Jew, say they hate pigs and oppose pigs, especially in literature. Sorry, Jews aren't book burners. But we know who is, don't we? We know who just murdered 12 people at a magazine. Radical Muslims fighting the jihad or the holy war. Now, I cannot say with great expertise whether or not Muslims or some Muslims actually hate pigs. Hate them enough to not want to see them in a kid's book. Hate them so much that instead of just not buying that book, they do something violent about it. I don't know. Let's say Oxford is right, that some jihadist terrorist might kill them for merely having a picture of a pig in a kid's book. The first answer is, you're Oxford. You don't follow Sharia law. You're the oldest university in the English-speaking world. You publish what you want to publish, not what some barbarians tell you you can't. But the second response is, why the hell did you blame the Jews? Why did you say the Jews were against it too? Well, I know why. It's obvious why. So even as you cower before Muslim extremists, you can pretend that you're not. You can pretend it's everyone, anyone against pigs. So you drag the Jews into it. They're why you can't have books about pigs, kids, those damn Jews. Seriously, why didn't Oxford University Press just skip the Muslim part altogether and just say they're terrified of Jews, which is why they self-censored? I mean, that's what Dieudonné would do, right? Blame the Jews. All good people hate what Dieudonné says, but he is not a terrorist. He's just a rude man. You can't fix that with laws unless you make the state itself totalitarian. And then all you can do to a man is to put a gag over his mouth. You can't change his mind through force. But what you do in the attempt is you empower all sorts of prosecutors and bureaucrats to go after others too. The Brigitte Bardots, the Mark Steins, the Ezra Levants. And that leads to an erosion of our culture where we forget how to debate. We forget how to argue back. We forget how to handle offensive people. We forget how to be good citizens, how to take responsibility for ideas in the public square. And we are trained to be whiners and complainers, running to the government at the first sign of offense, or in the case of Oxford University, just skipping straight to the end result right away and just banning things in advance without a prosecution and without even a complaint. We need prosecutions in France, but we need them of actual terrorists and those who recruit and train and incite actual terrorists. There are plenty of those people around, but unlike Dieudonné, who himself is Catholic, Oh, the real haters, the real terrorists, well, they're Muslim. Yeah, better not offend them. Maybe it's not just Dieudonné who loves the media attention. Maybe the French government itself loves it too. Media attention being distracted away from their inaction on real terrorism to focus on fake crimes of a failed comedian. More Source still ahead.